hold that? I don't know. Hello, everyone. My name is Deb Morris, and I'm an alcoholic. I received the gift of sobriety on April 19th of '03, and I'm really grateful for that. And, is anybody sure they don't want to come up and talk tonight? I'll settle down here in a minute. Caleb, thank you. It's a good thing I don't have to do your inventory tonight. So what I'm supposed to do tonight is tell you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. And I'll do the best that I can to do that. I see a lot of familiar faces. It's been several years since I've been down in this neighborhood, and it's good to see you all. Kathleen, it's good to see you. Yes, I was born and raised in North Dakota, aka the frozen tundra, and sorry, I just really don't like that. And the spotlights are really distracting too. You know, I used to be Saturday night entertainment, just not like this. So, a little nervous. I don't have the elixir. And I'm really full. I met my friend Todd. We used to spend a lot of Friday afternoons and Friday nights together when he lived in this neighborhood. And I miss him dearly, so it was really awesome to be able to hang out with him this afternoon and tonight. But one of the things that Todd and I do really well today is eat. So, obviously. So, I really need some help here, guys. Hello, God, you can show up now. I qualify. Caleb was trying to get some information from me for that introduction, and I had nothing. I think the biggest thing and how I qualify for Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the ways that I lived before I got here was, what do you got and give me more? There was never enough. And I'm waiting for that in the food area to calm down a little bit because that's one of the many things that I turn to today. But I know better today. So when you know better, you do better, right? I cannot tell you the first time I had a drink. Not one of those speakers. We had Sunday dinners as a family, and the kids would get juice glasses of wine with our Sunday dinners. And I can't tell you when that started. It started very early. But that, I think, is when I got my mantra. I want more. I can't tell you what it tasted like. Well, I couldn't, describe it back then, but I always wanted more. Most of the time they didn't cave to that. But I was pretty good at getting it when I wanted it, and I knew how to work the system. So, my dad was my best friend growing up. I am the baby of 3, the epitome of the baby of 3, the epitome of a daddy's girl. And the way it went for me was, it really took off when I was about 12, and I really started to seek solutions other than normal 12-year-old kids, I would think. I mean, I don't know. I thought my rearing was normal, and it was far from it, in hindsight. But I had a loving home, and I had loving grandparents, and we'd spend holidays with them. I grew up with both sets of grandparents, and my parents were married until I was an adult. And my brother was gone from the house. He's the oldest when I really started to entertain partying, for lack of a better term. My sister was 4 years older than me, is still 4 years older than me. My brother is still 7 years older than me. He's still a jerk. I shouldn't say that. I have a beautiful relationship with my brother, but that really only materialized a couple of years ago, quite frankly. Um, he just couldn't stop picking on me, and I couldn't stop being the victim. There's the real truth. So, my sister being 4 years older than me, and a lot of her friends were a lot of my friends' siblings were in the same class, and until I was about 13. But my dad was a member of the shrine, and they would go and do things, and my parents were out of town a lot. They liked to party, and I don't know about you guys, but when my parents were out of town, we had a party. And when the younger sibling would participate in the party, they were less likely to squeal on you. So that's how we rolled. And of course, those boys 4 years older than me at the time were really hot, so they liked to take care of me too. So when I would have my little temper tantrums for whatever reason, like when the hole got burned in my white carpet about this big and I freaked out a little bit, they just put their arm around me and took me on the patio and we had a chat and it was great. What carpet, right? I'm going to tell a couple of stories of my drinking when, actually I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad and my story. He was institutionalized in 1979, and I wasn't quite sure why. And I remember going to see him, and it was at the hospital, and I remember walking into that place and going up to the whatever floor it was, and the door was really heavy, and when it closed, it locked behind me, and I thought that was a little odd. I'd not been in that ward before, and I remember my dad sitting there and not looking so great, and they never really told me why he was there. They just said he was sick. And it was kind of disturbing to me. And he said he was working on some things, and what I learned later that he was working on was this piece of copper that had the Serenity Prayer on it, which is in my bedroom today. I'm really grateful that I got that. And so I was a freshman in high school when he got out of that place, and I remember his skin looked really kind of gray, and he'd lost a bunch of weight, and it was just weird. And it wasn't long after that my mom and I went to this meeting in this little city on the Minnesota side in the basement of a church, and it was an Al-Anon meeting. And they didn't have a lot of literature in the late 70s. And so I got my first copy of my big book at that meeting, third edition. And I was very interested to figure out what this alcoholism, now by this time I think somebody had said that that's what Dad had. But it didn't register, probably because I was high or drunk, with all transparency. And I remember going up those stairs, and I was very interested in kind of a mushy person, so my heart had been touched by these lovely people at this meeting, and my mom just said, "We are not going back there." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So the book went on the shelf, and we went about our business. And at that point in my life, I was staying out all hours of the night, and most of the time not even coming home. And I suffered absolutely no consequences, because either it was when Dad was in the hospital, or or prior to that, he wasn't around. I mean, he just wasn't there. So, at least not at night, right? So we had a lake home in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota that he stayed at. He had a partnership in a real estate company that they had asked him to leave. None of this did I know until he got sober. Probably I didn't even know it until I got sober, that he was asked to leave that company, and he had some trouble finding a job, and he was in real estate. So there was a timeshare company opening up where we had our lake home, and he was able to get on there. So I spent the summer there, which wasn't unusual for me, and had a job at the beach. And my boyfriend at the time, this is going to be a shocker, guys, but he was away at camp. Some kind of delinquency camp. I don't know. Because, my picker was pretty good back then, too. And so I was harboring him at the lake home. And what I didn't know then that I know now is that my dad called the law or whomever on him by direction of this young man's father, who happened to be my dad's first sponsor. So that was pretty interesting when all that unfolded, that I learned that my boyfriend's dad was my dad's sponsor. Again, I didn't know any of this back then, and I didn't really care that he wasn't there because it didn't really change my plans. I was doing what I was doing when I wanted to do it. And I want to just pay tribute, as I will, hopefully. It will be apparent that, thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous. Because having a 15-year-old daughter, 16, whatever I was, in the first year of sobriety had to have been a nightmare for my dad. And what I can tell you is that Alcoholics Anonymous and the people of Alcoholics Anonymous wrapped up my dad and carried him through that journey. And I'm forever grateful for that. My dad picked up one desire chip. And what an awesome example for a kid like me to be able to see that in my father. And that as much as we went through throughout his 36 years of sobriety, he died with 36 years, that he only had to pick up one chip. That's pretty awesome. And I attribute that to people just like you, all across the United States, because he was a gypsy man when he got sober, and went all over the place and got plugged in wherever he was, and I'm real grateful for that. And he kept his hands off me, and I think that's an important thing for us to realize, is that it's important for me for a couple of reasons. One, because I lived it. And two, because I have a son. And I'm not so sure that my son doesn't belong here or in some sort of 12-step program. I don't know what. But what I know is, what I learned from my dad is to keep my hands off of him. And that kind of goes right into sponsorship, right? Because a sponsor is somebody that is objective yet unaffected. When we cannot be objective and unaffected, then our role as a sponsor has stopped, in my opinion, based on my experience. So, I'll never forget, before I got sober, well, it wasn't long before I got sober, and I was going through a divorce, or it was right before or during or something, and I was asking my dad for some advice. And he would not give me his opinion or his advice. And I just remember I was just bawling, saying, "You'll help any drunk off the street, but you won't help me." And it was, I get emotional thinking about it because it just really hurt. But I think the emotion today is, I get it. He didn't have the capacity to help his baby. And that is what has gotten me through some of my trials with my adult son. And I can be there, I can listen, I can love him where he's at, but my mitts do not belong on him, and my opinion about his behavior doesn't matter either, really. I share my experience. When that happened to me, this is what I did. And some of that is experiences when I was still drunk. And I can say, this is what I did, and this is how it worked out. Wasn't so well. Didn't work so good for me. You might want to try something different. But anyway, so obviously I got married. I had a kid in that order. Shocker. And when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like, I've only been married and divorced once. I'm not so sure I belong here. What? You've never been divorced? I say to others, right? It's like, really? I thought that was a qualification. It's not. The delusions, really. The delusions that the book talks about and that we suffer from as alcoholics. Me in particular. I can only talk about me, but it's just mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. So, how did I get to Texas? So, just as we did as a family, we got bigger and better things because that's what we were trying to do. That's what my parents were trying, or my dad was trying to do, is got bigger and better things. And then we, lost the job, lost the house, all that. Kept me pretty sheltered because it wasn't long after Dad got sober that my sister went off to college. So I was the only one home, and we don't talk about that stuff, right? You don't talk about the elephant that's in the room. And then when Dad did get sober, he left, and Mom and Dad were still married, and I couldn't figure that out. What was that all about? And my mom followed her sister and brother-in-law here to this area in 1983. And then I had pretty much burned up all my relationships back home. So I followed her. That was my first geographical. And so I moved here in October of 1984. You guys this audience will really appreciate this. So when I moved here, I got a job at what used to be the Registry, which is it the Hotel Intercontinental now? Up on Dallas Parkway. And I worked in the flower shop because I had some experience, and I worked for 3 gay guys. Well, growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, y'all, if there were any gay people there, I didn't know about it. Okay. And so these 3 wonderful men that brought me down here to Cedar Springs for my first Halloween, and talk about a little white girl from Fargo, North Dakota on Cedar Springs. It was like, woo, the party. I had arrived, It was awesome. So, when I tell that story, there's not as much frivolity that goes on, but you guys can figure that out. I like this audience. So, welcome to Dallas, right? I kept finding places like that and people like that and our type of people, right? We gravitate to those people that we can relate to. What do you got, and give me more? So the little tornado named Deb wheeled through Dallas and every little crook and cranny that I could find. And, some of my fond memories are waking up in the middle of the night in a Whataburger parking lot somewhere between literally here and home, which at the time was in the Mid-Cities area. And God's grace was all over my story, drunk and sober. He asked me to marry him. That scared me. I said yes. I don't know why. Fear. And then my job offered me a job in the state of Washington in 1989. I'm like, sure. Sorry. See ya. I'm going, just run. Second geographical, my pickup truck, my dog, and the U-Haul trailer. And I moved to the state of Washington. And that's where I really started to see my patterns, because I don't know if it was a 6-foot U-Haul trailer that I pulled behind my truck. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a very big one. I didn't have a lot of stuff because I was living with my mom. Why would I? Why should I? I was there for a short, it was less than a year. I think it was about 9 months. And I had to get a 17-foot truck and put my pickup on a trailer behind that truck because I was trying to fill that hole. I got my dog, my truck, the big truck, and I went from Spokane, Washington to Atlanta, Georgia with my job. By the time, it wasn't long after I was in Georgia, it's like, I probably should get a part-time job. I should not have needed a part-time job. But I was just living like my daddy did. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. This has got to make things better. If I just have this, right? The people I was hanging with, that I found right away in Georgia were people just like me. So I was working at the Kmart and my full-time job trying to make ends meet. And I just got real lonely. So I called him and said, come get me. So it didn't work before. Maybe it'll work now. Not so much. Came back to Texas then in 1991. Early of 1991, we planned our wedding. We got married in the fall of 1991. Had my son in 1992. And it'll be okay. He'll do this. Oh, I'll be able to get him to do this. What? Joint bank account? I don't think so. Because then he'd see what I was doing, right? We were together all-time total about 12 or 13 years. I left him a Dear John letter one day and packed up my stuff with my son and left. And then he convinced me to come back. So just these patterns, right? You see it? You think I qualify? Maybe. He liked to drink like I drank. So that marriage finally ended. We had joint custody. That marriage ended in 2002. And I was smarter the second time, though, because then I fought for the house, so I'd have a roof over my head. But the problem was I couldn't keep a job by this time. My neighbor's father said that he would buy my house at any time if I wanted to get rid of it. And so just before it foreclosed, I sold it to my neighbor's dad. And I got out of there and I moved in with my mom and my aunt at almost 40 years old. My brother, at this time, at the end of my drinking, I was working for a stripper as a babysitter, and I was a grunt in a body shop, moving trash, and living with my mom. It's a proud moment. So my brother called me and said, will you come to California and babysit our daughter while we take a trip to New York for our anniversary? And I said, sure. He goes, we'll pay you. And I'm like, okay. So when I sold my house, I was able to pay off my car. And so the only bills I had was my car insurance and my cell phone bill, really. Because why would I have to pay rent at my mom's house? That would be absurd. At almost 40 years old, this was my thinking. How sad is that? My brother got sober in 1990. And I don't know if he saw the writing on the wall. He certainly knew I had been affected by the disease of alcoholism because he grew up in that same house. My sister-in-law got me right at the exact right time, and she said, how would you like to go to an Al-Anon meeting with me Saturday? And I'm like, okay. And I walked in, and I knew that I belonged. And she goes over to the pamphlet rack, and she pulls one out on detachment, and she hands it to me, and I'm clutching my newcomer packet, and I said, I'm sure there's one in here. And she said, you could have two. Oh, she had my number. So I walked out of that Al-Anon meeting and left California knowing three things. I needed to find a home group, I needed to find a sponsor, and I needed to take the 12 steps. So when I got back to the DFW area, that was my mission. And that was in March of 2003. So I got plugged into an Al-Anon group. I got me a black belt sponsor. She said, get you a big book, get you an AA 12 and 12. And what I heard was, oh, by the way, get how Al-Anon works. So I'd had at least one piece of Al-Anon literature. She did recommend the daily readers as well. So there, I was off to recovery, right? I always felt better after meeting. Her husband was in AA, made sure that I had a Fort Worth directory to all the meetings, and gave me one of those elbows as those alcoholic husbands do, and said, you should probably try to go to as many open AA meetings as possible. Okay, great. I left a step study meeting on a Saturday morning of April 19th of 2003, and I did not feel right. I didn't feel just a little bit better that day. I didn't know what was wrong with me, but something wasn't right. So I pulled that Fort Worth directory out, and I found a noon meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't even know if it was open or closed. But I walked in there, and of course there were 3 men older than dirt, and I was going through this, with the smoke. It's a story we hear often. When the guy that walked in to chair the meeting in his khaki pants and his pressed white shirt and his blue sport coat and his part perfect and his hair combed, and he was happy. And he offered a desire chip, and I said, I'll take one. Had absolutely no idea what I was in for, nor did I know why I chose. I don't know why, but I have a suspicion that was the hand of God that it talks about in our book. And I haven't had a drink since. So then, I'm still working with my Al-Anon sponsor. Don't let that cat out of the bag quite yet, that I picked up a desire chip. I didn't know why, but I look back and it's like, I'm such an alcoholic. It was when I was taking step 3 with my Al-Anon sponsor, and I read this. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of our shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. Blah, blah, blah. And I have in my book 5/7/03 at 10:35 a.m. And I was on the patio to my mom's house when I read that. And that's when I conceded to my innermost self that desire chip I picked up on April 19th was for real. That I picked it up for a reason. And so my journey began in Alcoholics Anonymous. Sort of. That Al-Anon sponsor had to come clean with her, right? And I don't know when I told her. And she got real serious real fast. And she said, Deb, that's the deadly part of the disease. You need to get over to Alcoholics Anonymous and find you a sponsor. And I said, let's not overreact. I am doing just fine here. I don't want to drink. I want to finish the steps because that's what I got you for. And she assured me in not a very friendly manner. I mean, it wasn't unfriendly, but it was, she watched too many people die from this disease. So it was loving in that way. And she said that she really would strongly recommend that I get over there, but she wasn't going to abandon me. And that's really what I needed to hear, is because, see, I had been abandoned by my father. I didn't know it, but that's what had happened. And my mother abandoned me in a certain way because she didn't know what the heck to do with me, much less what to do with her marriage and her husband. So, thank goodness, she lovingly encouraged me to go to the rooms of AA, but she didn't kick me out of Al-Anon. So, I've had a plethora of angels in this journey of sobriety, but what I want to talk about now is what Alcoholics Anonymous is about to me and what I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I refer to the book a lot. It was funny, I was in a meeting with my dad in Detroit Lakes one time, and whatever the topic was, I don't even remember, but I started to read something out of the book that related to the topic. And then I like to read a little bit and say then how I can relate my experience to that. And I did this, and this Native American guy that was about probably close to 50 years sober told me to shut up. So we speak the language of the heart here. We know what that book says. And I just went, okay. Lesson learned. And I thought, I could see everything in that room today. And I can see this faceless figure who I think was my dad's higher power, just putting his hands on his shoulder. Shut up, Dick. Don't say anything, Dick. My dad's name is Richard, but that's another thing. We had a great story when I told my story at Lambda one time when I said that. Anyway, he handled himself with grace and dignity, and I am quite sure that that old timer was force fed to call me and make an amend to me. And that's okay. I don't feel bad for that because I still do it today. It doesn't stop me because this is my design. This is what saved my life. When I suffer from alcoholism still today and I have stupid thinking, my thoughts are still very alcoholic. And the only way to overcome those thoughts is to follow the dictates of this book and have a relationship with a higher power that can run my life far better than I can. And the forward to the first edition, it says what my job is today. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. And I do that today to the best of my ability. And by the way, ugly gets you there too, because it's not always pretty with this alcohol. So that's what I'm supposed to do. So that's the main purpose, right? And the main object, it tells us, is on page 45. So it tells us that lack of power is our dilemma. I just kind of alluded to that from the heart, not the book, but I have a lack of power. So we have to find this power greater than ourselves. And on page 45, it says it's the main object of this book is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Wow. Because this book tells me that the drinking is just a symbol. It's just a symptom of my disease, of my illness, my spiritual malady, if you will. The problem lies between this ear and this ear. So how do I treat it? Well, I treat it by finding that object, by finding that power greater than myself. For those of you that may or may not have read later, it says later in the book, it says it'll solve all our problems. But in that particular paragraph, it says it's focusing on the problem of alcoholism. So, people just like you in rooms just like this all over the United States have taught me how to do this. So when my dad died, I got to be there, which was really cool. And on his deathbed, all he wanted was his big book, and he wanted my brother to read that last couple paragraphs on page 164. And that was really powerful. And I'm glad he asked Rick to do it and not me. Because I don't think I could have done it. And so that's kind of how one of the things that we did, we stood around his bed, and listened to how we abandon ourselves, right? And then we had an AE meeting for a celebration of life, of course. We started with the Serenity Prayer, we ended with the Lord's Prayer, and in between, people got up and talked. One was his sponsor and my nephew. My dad said this too, and this is pretty funny. We'd be sitting in a meeting, and maybe it'd be on, I think it was on a men's, and And he was talking about how just having me there in a meeting with him was part of his amends to show him how to live, to show me how he lives today, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, I got 3 kids. My oldest is in the program. My baby here is in the program. And the middle one turned Catholic. We still can't figure that out. And then my sister-in-law, who's married to my brother, turned Catholic at about 25 years in Al-Anon. It's just strange. It works that way. This is one of the things I read when we celebrated my father's life. It's on page 28. It says, "We in turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works." And that has been my experience. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I really, really do. And I'm so grateful that I have had every single experience from the moment my toes hit the ground until right here, right now. It's people like Kathleen. It's people like Claudia. It's people like Jerry J, Larry J, Lloyd J. What is it with those J men that were so prominent in my early recovery? I got some of my first kisses in AA by those gentlemen, And that is okay because they weren't 13th stepping me, but they were showing me that this is a safe place. And it's my job to continue to make that a safe place because you know what? There's just as many women predators in Alcoholics Anonymous as there are men. And we have got to keep this place safe, for each other and for those that haven't made it here yet. Get in the middle of AA is what they always tell me. Get in the middle of AA. Well, what does that mean? Be humble. Well, how can I get in the middle? It'd be all about me if I'm supposed to be humble. It was very confusing for a long time for me. But you guys exercised patience with me, and you taught me. And you taught me by your actions. You taught me by the way you behaved, and not the way, not necessarily all the words you said, right? There's this thing about anonymity, right? We're an anonymous program, and it's a personal thing for people, and sometimes we out ourselves in different situations. Sometimes we don't want to. Sometimes based on what we do for a living, it's not appropriate. I got a job when I was about 30 days sober, and I was at that job. God bless them, what they had to go through. I was at that job for my first 14 and a half years of sobriety. Can't believe they put up with me during that time. The first Christmas, it was in the restaurant business, and the first Christmas, that just all these bottles of booze kept ending up on my desk because that's what they did back at, and that's what they do in the hospitality industry. I think it's probably not quite as bad as it used to be, but I'm just like, no. I think I outed myself, in the first 30 days I was there because I just wasn't in a place to receive that or to decline it respectfully. So there were quite a few people that know there, and there were 2 people that I worked with that I was able to share my experience, strength, and hope. They're both dead today. One just died within the last couple years, and I'm not sure what he died from. He had moved away from here, but I went to the funeral of somebody else that couldn't live with alcohol, and he couldn't live without it. And he paid he did the supreme sacrifice. Whew. And then this young man walks in, first day on the job, and I'm in the kitchen getting coffee, and Man, he looks sharp, his hair's cut, he's clean, it's his first day on the job, and I out myself at 7:30 in the morning that I was an alcoholic and a member of AA, and why I said that, I don't even remember it, honestly. I got a call from that man after that job had ended. That company was bought out, and they relocated their offices, so I was laid off. A legitimate layoff, by the way. Had plenty of layoffs before, but that was a legitimate one. And this man said to me, that he thinks he might have a problem with alcohol. And I said, where are you? And he told me, and I said, well, where can we meet? And he told me. And I got in the car. And I grabbed, not this book, my hardcover that was falling apart, still's falling apart, but it's been retired to home because I don't want to lose those pages. And we sat, and I said, come on, get in the car. And he said, whoa, no. I said, get in the car. And he said, give me a cigarette. And I got to take that man to his first AA meeting. And the men in that room, somebody handed him a big book, and I told him whose men's numbers he could accept and whose he couldn't. Pretty sure that's how it went down. And I could be objective yet unaffected by helping that man. And that man's in this room today. And what an honor and a privilege that is. And I can't look at him. I love him a lot, and the gifts that he has given me by just being present, right? What an honor. Then there's Todd. No, Todd's just one of those guys that we have a heart connection, and we get to have that over and over and over. And a lot of those heart connections we get in Alcoholics Anonymous come and go. Some of those relationships that we get in Alcoholics Anonymous are full and vibrant and just beautiful. And then they drift apart. Not because anybody gets drunk or dead, they just change. But the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me so many gifts, and one of those gifts is how to have relationships. And how to recognize that relationship maybe isn't serving either one of us anymore. And so they go on. And then there's those relationships that you have and that go real strong, and then you drift apart, but then you pick up right where you left off when you get the opportunity to be with those people. And those relationships taught me things like how to take care of my dying mother one day at a time in my living room, and that I could usher her out. That was a little crazy. I got a little loony, just ask Todd, but I could do that. I could serve my mother. I could tuck her into bed. The changing of the guards. One of my friends in Alcoholics Anonymous told me that. It's the changing of the guards. And I could do that with grace and dignity. And I could honor her. And for those last couple years of her life, whatever Mom wanted, she got. So my mom didn't have the tools to deal with what she just didn't have the tools, right? And so one of the things my mom did for me was she tried to buy my love. So let me just give her gifts, right? So she just perpetuated my own sick behavior. And until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know how to deal with that. But people in Alcoholics Anonymous had that experience, and they taught me how to deal with that. That every once in a while, give her the chance to do that. But then just ask her to stop. I don't need that, Mom. Thanks, though. I appreciate it. Things like that, heaven forbid, people pleaser would never do in the past, right? I got to see my mom. This is so cool. I got to see my mom incorporate principles, spiritual principles in her life, the way that we live on a daily basis because of the black words on the white page. She picked that up from my brother and me. And I got to see her use our principles in her life. And what a gift. What a gift, right? Because we learn. It's learned behavior. Some people use that as a cop-out. In this particular case, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So it strengthens and confirms the fact that if I continue to do what you people have taught me and follow the dictates of a higher power, that I have no idea what kind of a ripple effect that can have. Sometimes I get to witness it like I did with my mom. Sometimes I don't. I was my home got flooded in the snowstorm was that last year? I don't even know. It was this year, February, right? It was a long 6 months. I didn't think I handled it very well, but the people around me told me I did. I did threaten to cut appendages off. Not to their face, but to my sponsor. I was able to call and said, I just want to cut his off. And she told me that I couldn't do that. And I said, okay. But I made it through, and I didn't commit suicide or homicide, and I didn't cause any harm physically to anybody. And I didn't cheat my insurance company. I didn't have to have the best of everything. But I got to make it better because I did the right thing. What a blessing that Alcoholics Anonymous is. And like I said, I love the name of this group, We Are Not Saints, because I am not a saint. I am not. But I am so much better than I used to be. So much better than I used to be. My biggest thing today is that I take that time to nurture that relationship with my higher power. Because it wasn't until I was 10 years sober that I realized the only thing that stands between me and a drink is my higher power. I think for the first 10 years of my recovery, I would say, God, help me stay sober. Help me? Are you kidding me? That relationship. That power, I talked about it, right? That's the only power that can keep me from picking up a drink. And I love what my grand sponsor says, the further I get away from the drink, the more I need Alcoholics Anonymous. The more I need that relationship. Because it talks about cunning, Jeff read it, right? Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. And I got to be honest with you guys. Drinking is not, I know it's not the solution today. But I'll go to offing myself in a New York second. That's where my alcoholism takes me today. And why would I want to leave a life like this? It's not pretty. This last couple years hasn't been real fun as a society, right? But I can still be happy, joyous, and free, despite what's going on around me. What an honor and a privilege. Thanks for letting me share.